Hey everyone, Kyle Walker here. If you love cars, fixing things, or just want to understand your vehicle better, you're in the right place. I share hands-on tips, smart driving advice, and straight-up car talk without the fluff. Make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and stick around till the end. You don't want to miss what's coming up. Let's get into it.
The operation of the vehicle requires the mandatory use of various test and measurement devices. Some of them are already installed in the car, and the information from them is transmitted to the onboard computer. Others, however, must be used by the car owner himself. To ensure trouble-free and safe operation of a car with an internal combustion engine, it is extremely important to monitor the condition of the fuel system. For this purpose, special pressure gauges are used to determine the pressure. These are not the most complex from the position of the design of devices that can be easily purchased or assembled with their own hands. Which option to choose, each motorist decides for himself. Why measure pressure? A modern motorist who owns a fairly new vehicle relies heavily on the operation of sensors and measuring devices, the information from which is fed to the electronic control unit and then displayed on the onboard computer display or on the dashboard. The corresponding signals and errors make it clear where and what has happened and what measures need to be taken. In parallel, the car can manifest the fact of problems by stalling when gaining speed, unsuccessful attempts to start the engine, jerking under acceleration, and other symptoms. It is very difficult to instantly realize what is wrong with the car. Sometimes the car owner begins to check many different mechanisms, starts to disassemble the elements of the engine, but still does not find the cause. Before making all these complex actions, it is strongly recommended to check the pressure in the fuel ramp. If it turns out to be below the norm, it will greatly simplify the search for the cause of malfunction. In the case of fuel system pressure, it is not worth relying on the ECU. The ECU is not responsible for controlling this parameter. Only with a severe drop in pressure, when it begins to negatively affect the operation of other systems, the fault can be detected by other sensors. But it is not worth bringing it to this point. To check the fuel system requires an appropriate pressure gauge. It can be purchased or made with your own hands. With the help of such gauges, it is checked under what pressure the gasoline is supplied in the ramp. If the measurements show a lack of fuel pressure, there is a problem with the engine, and it must be solved before there are more serious signs of malfunction than twitching. Measuring the pressure with a pressure gauge, the normal pressure is usually about 2.5 atmospheres. Such indicators are considered normal if the measurements are taken at idle engine speed. If the driver slightly presses the gas pedal, then the measuring device will show already within 3.0 to 3.2 atmospheres. When there is a deviation from the norm, there may be malfunctions with fuel pump, pressure regulator, injectors, filters, etc. Pressure control is essential if you have a diesel or injector engine at your disposal. If the pressure does not meet the standards, the fuel will not be able to cope with the resistance created by the injectors. Therefore, the engine will start to malfunction and fuel consumption will increase. In order for the motorist to be able to get information about the state of the fuel system, it is envisaged to use a fuel pressure gauge. This pressure gauge is connected in parallel and does not interfere with the normal operation of the fuel system. Recommendations for selection. To be able to periodically and as necessary to monitor the operation of the fuel system and its condition, you cannot do without fuel pressure gauges. It is enough for a motorist to have at his disposal one such device. It is only necessary to determine in advance which one is needed and which one is suitable for the planned tasks. To check the pressure gauge to check the pressure in the fuel supply system gave accurate parameters when measuring, it is recommended to choose a quality device. If you turn to the sellers, you will meet a huge variety of models and manufacturers, but the main role will be played by the design and technical characteristics of the device. All of them are divided into two large groups. Analog. They are also mechanical. They are represented in the form of an arrow and a measuring scale. With their help, the user can see what pressure is now in the fuel ramp. The design of analog devices is as simple as possible, which gives such an obvious advantage as reliability. If you correctly understand the nuances of application, the display parameters will correspond to the real pressure in the system. That is, the error will be insignificant. But mechanical devices have one disadvantage. It is a rather large range of error. It is especially pronounced when it is in the hands of an inexperienced motorist. But the demand for analog pressure gauges is still high. In many respects, this can be explained by the low cost. Digital, an alternative to mechanical gauges and a more modern version of a pressure gauge, is a digital device. It is characterized by more accurate results, as well as a minimum error. For such a pleasure, you will have to pay a little more than for the analog version. All data during measurement are displayed on the display. At the same time, the user has the possibility to choose between different units of measurement, which makes the digital device more functional and versatile. Correctness of measurement directly depends on the accuracy class. Here it is important to intelligently choose a device that is suitable for measuring the pressure in the fuel car ramp. Read also, hubs on the SUV. Minimizing the load on the vehicle, some people actively use a tire pressure gauge, that is, a device designed to monitor the pressure in the tires of the vehicle. There is nothing surprising here, since devices for measuring tire pressure, oil, and fuel function on an identical principle. But there are certain peculiarities that you should be aware of before buying such a supposedly multifunctional device. To measure the pressure in the ramp of the fuel system of the car, the limit values should be at the level of 5 to 7 atmospheres. If the air pressure is measured, then here the interval varies from 16 to 20 units. If you take an air pressure gauge and connect it to the fuel ramp, the error will be very high. The device will not be able to show the correct parameters. And even tenths of fractions play a role here. When choosing an analog-type measuring device for yourself, be sure that the scale offered will be easy to read. Sometimes the font is very small, or the scale is divided in a way that is not quite clear and easy to read. At the same time, the measuring limit should be 5 to 6 atm. If you have decided on the model, then lastly check the tightness of all connections. This is extremely important, as you will have to work with fuel. As for digital devices, then everyone decides for himself whether to buy them or not. Their cost is noticeably higher than mechanical or analog pressure gauges, and not always such costs justify themselves. If your financial situation allows, and you are not sorry to spend this money on a pressure gauge, feel free to buy. And it is better to choose devices from well-known brands with a high class of accuracy. Adjustment: the gauge itself must be adjusted to check the fuel pressure in your vehicle's system. This procedure involves the use of a special spring-type reference gauge. The pressure in the system is changed, and the arrow of the measuring device is adjusted to it. This allows to achieve the most accurate parameters. Adjustment is carried out by turning the hand wheel on a screw press designed to measure pressure values. Working with the screw and moving the rods, the optimum position of the arrow of the mechanical pressure gauge is adjusted. First, you need to set the initial value and gradually adjust the entire length of the scale of the device. Such a procedure can hardly be performed independently. This is not necessary if you purchase a new manometer. If inaccuracies occur as you use it, the error will increase. The device can be sent for professional adjustment. For an ordinary motorist who is engaged only in periodic maintenance of his own car, the procedure is not the most obligatory. Sometimes it is easier to buy a new pressure gauge than to look for laboratories and specialists to adjust it. To control the pressure inside the fuel system of a vehicle, special fuel pressure regulators with a manually adjustable pressure gauge are often used. It is usually installed in place of the factory regulator in cars where the injector engine is used. Such a device positively affects the performance of injectors. Thus, the car owner is able to pump more fuel into the working cylinders of the engine, thereby increasing the power. Regulator with adjustable pressure is superior to standard devices in that it gives the opportunity to change the parameters of the flow of gasoline under pressure. Read also, restoration of chrome-plated parts of the car from oxidation, homemade pressure gauge. The procedure of measuring the fuel pressure in the respective system of the vehicle is mandatory and must be carried out periodically by the car owner himself. Therefore, there is a need for a measuring device. If you do not want to buy a factory manometer, you can assemble a homemade device. Moreover, there is nothing complicated to this procedure. Self-assembly of the gauge allows you to save money and also get additional experience in making effective and useful devices with your own hands. In the correctness of the work of the homemade fuel gauge, a great role is played by the choice of components for subsequent assembly. The design will consist of such components: pressure gauge. The gauge itself will still have to buy. But here you can do with an ordinary mechanical gauge designed to control oil pressure. It costs literally 100 rubles and has an optimal measuring scale, unlike air devices for tires. In this regard, a manometer from VAZ cars shows itself perfectly, gasoline fitting. It will be necessary to unscrew it and install the hose in place of the oil pressure regulator. If the thread is not suitable for the connection, you will have to buy an adapter socket. Be careful when selecting threads. This design requires a thread marked July 16, 20 UNF. It will not be a problem to find such a connector. And it costs a penny, gasoline filter. It is needed precisely to use the fittings included in the filter design. Buy inexpensive filters, as there is no point in expensive devices. Remove the fittings from the filter. For better and more convenient assembly, you need to flatten the ends a bit. If desired and possible, some people themselves milled the fitting to the right size, for clamps for strong fastening, which will not allow air to pass through. Thus, it will be possible to achieve accuracy in measuring the pressure parameters in the fuel ramp, fuel hose. Buy a product with a length of at least 1 meter. Otherwise, it may not be enough. Connector for the fuel system. Outwardly similar to the letter Y. With its search, there should also be no problems. Then it remains only to connect all the components with each other and check the device in operation. Assembly procedure. If you have correctly selected all the components, then the assembly will take minutes. But it is better not to hurry. Check everything carefully and proceed step by step. To begin with, the purchased fuel hose is divided into 3 sections. Here you will need 2 pieces of approximately the same length, as well as 1 small element of the hose. Now take the fuel system connector. The fuel hose is connected to it. Clamps are used to secure the connection. Be sure to check that all connection points are tight. Otherwise, the measurements will be incorrect, and you will not be able to get accurate information about the operation of the fuel system. At one end of the fuel hose, a measuring device is connected, i.e., the manometer you purchased earlier. Here you also use fittings and clamps to ensure a tight connection. At this point, the work can be considered complete. There is nothing really complicated here. Now you have a full-fledged device that allows you to measure the pressure inside the fuel system of your vehicle. To make measurements, you need to connect one free end of the hose to the inlet on the fuel ramp. The second goes to the outlet on the fuel filter. Using such a homemade device, you can at any time check the pressure in the system and take appropriate measures in case of detection of deviations from the norm and malfunctions. But if the option of self-assembly of the fuel gauge does not suit you, it is much easier to buy a ready-made factory product. Here each car owner decides for himself how to do better and what to choose. In conclusion, assembling your own fuel pressure gauge can be a rewarding and cost-effective project. By carefully selecting the right components and following the steps outlined in this video, you can create a reliable tool that enhances your understanding of your vehicle's fuel system. Remember to prioritize safety and accuracy throughout the process. With a little patience and attention to detail, you'll have a functional gauge that meets your needs. Thank you for watching, and happy assembling.